A very warm welcome to our Digital Dialogue webinar series. Please note that these webinars are being recorded. After the session, you are going to be able to access these recordings and the presentations through our website. Through this webinar series, we're exploring the latest trends in digital transformation. And more importantly, we're looking at how digitization is able to help us combat and overcome some of the most serious and impactful challenges that we're facing today in our ever-changing world. I'm Rose Wesby, Director for Digital Transformation at ABB, and your moderator throughout this Digital Dialogue webinar series. In this session, we're going to be hearing from Sydney van Bokhoven, who is our Global E-Mobility Solutions Development Manager, and he will be discussing with us how we can reduce the cost of ownership of EV chargers, a very important topic when looking at the overall total cost of ownership of e-mobility generally. As well as sharing his insights, he's also going to be able to answer your questions live. If you have any questions throughout this interesting presentation and also near the end, don't hesitate to please send us those questions through the Q&A feature available through the WebEx. Those introductions to us are totally confidential and anonymous, and we will certainly get to them at the end. I'm sure Sydney would be delighted to answer each and every one of them. With that, it just leaves me to introduce our speaker this afternoon or morning, dependent on where you are in the world. And therefore, I can proudly hand over to my colleague, Sydney van Bokhoven. Over to you.
Well, thanks, Rose, for the introduction, and welcome all to this webinar. I will be talking about how you can reduce the cost of ownership for EV chargers or EV infrastructure in this session. And during this session, I will give you a quick demonstration as well as for our web tools that we use in the EV charging business. So within ABB, we have the ambition to make the zero-emission society a reality. And a big part of the global carbon dioxide emission is related to the transportation sector. So if we consider that the population has increased by 1.4 billion people over the last 2 decades, and the amount of passenger travel increased as well, it is fair to say that there's a growing transportation need. And as driving on electricity typically emits 54% fewer carbon dioxide compared to the average gasoline car, we think the electrification of vehicles will be a crucial step towards the zero-emission world. Here are some key figures of our EV charging infrastructure business. As you can see, we have over a decade of experience in the field, and we have sold over 14,000 chargers around the world and in more than 80 countries. And through those chargers, we have enabled around 24 million charging sessions. And that's really enormous, and we're really proud of that. Although sales of vehicles dropped during the first 2 quarters of 2020 because of the COVID impact, the EV sales globally actually increased. And this is an overview of the electrification timeline. And this is a graph on passenger cars. And you can see that it is driven by multiple stakeholders. For example, the government, some environmental decisions, the economy, and of course, the technology behind it. The past few years, we have been into the early adopter phase in which a few car manufacturers introduced their electric vehicles. And we see now that we are moving towards the increasing acceptance. More car manufacturers are introducing new models. The range of the vehicles increases. And we expect this trend to go up in the coming years, as in 5 to 6 years we will expect a mass market adoption, and in 30 years most of the sales of car vehicles will be electric. So we are the one-stop shop for e-mobility infrastructure, as we can now offer all necessary equipment that is needed to support your EV charging site, and starting from the electrical substations towards the EV chargers for each segment, You can see on the right top side, the substations part, integrated solutions up to the e-bus chargers. And besides that, we have the DC fast chargers, which are typically used near highway locations, and eventually also the destination charging on the left side that is situated or can be used at office buildings or at home locations. That's all great, but to maintain and support your operation, we need charging software. And this software is enabled through the ABB Ability platform. Besides the equipment that is needed, we can also offer the necessary service, such as installation and commissioning, and of course, the integration with renewable energy sources and building automation. So what are the challenges in EV charging infrastructure? Let's go first on the graph on the right. You can see the investment into EV charging hardware will increase over time. And as mentioned, this relates to the increasing sales of electric vehicles. And we expect to see a big increased investment rate during the next period. That's basically because it becomes more adopted by large investment firms and by the people itself. So what are the challenges when you start an EV charging infrastructure? It is good to mention that typically the business case relies on selling power to EV drivers. And to enable this service, you need the charging infrastructure behind it. It can be capital intensive because of the cost of the hardware, the installation and commissioning, and of course the electricity prices and potential the electricity grid connection upgrade. On the operation side of running a network, the cost relies typically on the geographical distribution. And topics like customer support are quite important, maintenance and service, traveling time for service and operations. So there's a lot to think about when running a charging infrastructure. So luckily, we have within ABB years of experience to support your business to solve those challenges. And for a successful operation, we have the connected services for the charging infrastructure. It is an integrated and flexible service to solve lots of your challenges. Through the connectivity, you can remotely monitor and configure the charge points. Of course, service the equipment efficiently. Through that, you can increase the charger uptime and build a scalable network. Our ABB Ability platform infrastructure is actually built to support the increasing number of connected chargers, so it can grow with your business as well. Through the use of ABB Ability and our web tools, you could minimize the investment costs of your IT infrastructure. And for remote service and remote customer support, you can help and you can investigate the charger remotely and help your customers through the web tools. As new EVs are being introduced all over the world, and we expect this to be increased by the coming years, we can keep the charger up to date with the newest software to support all those new EV electric vehicles. And last but not least, there's functionality to adapt your business model, as pricing and business models behind the EV charging can change over time. You can adapt to that business model as well. For example, applying virtual marketing on the screens of the chargers. And a reliable 24/7 connectivity is actually fundamental to operate a successful commercial network. So let's go a bit into the details of how the EV charger is connected. And let's look at the picture on the right. A charger typically has a direct connection to an operator's backend, and this is mainly for authorization of the drivers and the financial handling of it. So this connection is managed by the Open Charge Point Protocol, also called OCPP, which is widely used and supported all over the globe. And we offer the advantage of having a dual uplink of our chargers towards an operator backend, and the ABB Ability platform. From this platform, you can have access to our various web tools and the access for ABB service and support. And this way, you could minimize the on-site intervention as well, as up to 90% of the service cases that have been escalated to ABB are diagnosed remotely, and over 75% of the cases are repaired without any on-site intervention. So these web tools and these service tools are also available to be used by your own resources, and of course by any third-party support company to have the full comfort and flexibility without any disadvantages. So now let's move to an actual demonstration of our Charger Care web tool. So this is our Charger Care web tool built on the ABB Ability platform. And as you can see, this is a dashboard of all your chargers that are linked to your account. You can see each different type of charger, the location, the availability, the connectivity status, and the outlet status as well. In the case you have multiple sites, you can also use the map view, and this is quite handy if you have multiple locations and you could visually inspect immediately through color-based tags what the status of each individual charger is. So let's click on one. So you could see immediately the charger status, the internet connectivity, and the location of that specific charger. If you dive into the charger, you can simply click on it, and you have a specific status monitoring device tool to investigate your charger. So you can visually inspect the connectivity status of the last 24 hours and also the charger status of the last 24 hours. If we go to the charging sessions, you could simply select a period. Let's select 1 September, search for it. So you can immediately see all the charging sessions that have been enabled by your charger during that period, and of course the amount of energy that it has been delivered. So this is quite handy to have a quick overview and monitor the devices. If you're interested into charger statistics, you can also go to that page. And this will visually give you some statistics of your charger, which can be used for KPIs. If you own multiple locations and multiple chargers, you can go to the network statistics, select a period, and you will have an overview of all the sessions that have been enabled by all your chargers with the delivered energy specified. So let's move back to the presentation. So previously, electricity grid connections for charging sites could be a challenge when running an infrastructure. And that's because we're moving towards increasing amounts of charging power. The battery capacity of the vehicles become bigger, and we want to charge as quickly as possible. So this means there should be a large enough electricity grid connection available on that location. But that's not always possible, either from a cost perspective side or from a physical limitation of that location. With our site energy management solution, we could provide opportunities to overcome these obstacles. By allocating charging power according to the existing system limit or other on-site assets, this allows the site owner to reduce the peak energy costs and by enabling additional chargers on a site without violating the grid limits. If the site has local capacity limitations, we can seamlessly integrate a solution with renewable energy sources and/or specifically the energy storage systems to maintain a sustainable and growing charging infrastructure. It can as well be used to delay upgrading the existing electrical grid connection until there are more EVs on roads, or simply it will allow you to establish a growing customer base of EV drivers. With this solution, you can save up to 55% on the peak energy cost and reduce your capital investments significantly. So ABB is a trusted partner in the evolution of transportation, and we're happy to say that we are the preferred infrastructure partner to the largest charging networks. And this is a quick overview of all or some of the customers in which we could supply our infrastructure. For example, Electrify America, which has a nationwide network in North America, and Ionity, for example, which has a wide European network as well. So we are very proud of that to supply all our technology to these companies. So to summarize the presentation, how can you reduce the total cost of ownership of a charging infrastructure? And this is actually done by digitalization, remote connectivity, and smart control of your site. And ABB can diagnose more than 90% of service cases remotely, thanks to our ABB Ability platform, and solving over 75% of the without any on-site intervention. So this can result in significant savings on downtime, traveling, and so forth. The ABB Ability web tools increase safety, profitability, and availability of the charging network. So besides all that, with the site energy management solution, you can enable a growing and sustainable network of EV charging sites. So this all combined results into a best customer experience at a low total cost of ownership. So to conclude, let's move over to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Sydney. And thank you everyone who's beginning to send through your questions. Please do continue to do so, and we'll be sure to pose them to Sydney right away. But Sydney, talk to me a little bit more about what is coming next. ABB already has a pretty comprehensive, significant portfolio of solutions in EV charging. What else can we do, and what else will we be doing?
Yeah, good question, Rose. Bidirectional charging is a topic that is quite interesting. It is a concept of using the energy from a car to power your home, or eventually giving power back to the grid. So in this way, you could store renewable energy sources in vehicles, or deliver the energy back when it's needed. This could be an important step towards the smart city with distributed energy resources. So you could expect, or you can expect, an announcement soon, which will really innovate the markets. And of course, since digital services is becoming more included into the society, we will extend our web tools as well, with even more new features to support these innovations through the ABB Ability platform. Yeah.
So for those innovations, Sydney, we need an evolving world around us too. What do you feel that the future of cities is going to be looking like in the next 5 years or so when it comes to e-mobility?
Yeah, so electrification is, in my opinion, quite inevitable towards a zero-emission society. I expect an increased adoption of electric vehicles, and in some front-runner countries, an adoption of local energy communities. So these communities are actually areas where energy is being produced locally and consumed locally. I expect also, besides that vehicles become much more smarter, and that vehicles become much more smarter, and that autonomous driving is also will take an impact. probably some governments will support also the public transportation sector, in which will have a big impact on the different areas, as the public transportation sector is an immediate change that can be expected to electrify or even go zero emission. Yeah.
Thanks, Sydney. I'm going to push you on a bit further because I know you're sitting in the Netherlands and there are a lot of countries that have been, let's say, early adopters of e-mobility related solutions. Do you think that there's going to be a divergence where these countries still charge further ahead under the protection of the government new legislation? Or do you think that there's going to be more of broader, wider opportunities in countries who are only beginning that journey?
Yeah, there will be broader legislation of electrifying the infrastructure. As you can see, different areas in different regions are already in the uptake phase of accepting the electrification of e-mobility, and also in other carbon dioxide emission related topics. So I expect that the front-runner countries will move or take the leads, and will be an example for the other countries to follow. Yeah.
So for our customers on the call today, if they are interested to learn more about the existing EV related portfolio in ABB, what would be your recommendation for how to get in touch or find out more?
So you can always get in touch through our websites, in which you can fill in a form and get into contact with our local representatives. They can assist you with your situation and with your questions as well, and think with you. So let's go for that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sydney, for joining us all the way from the Netherlands. And thank you very much to our audience as well for taking the time to join us today. As we come to a close and we end this session, you will see a very short survey about providing us a little bit of feedback. It's very important to us, so we do hope you take the time to fill that in. But other than that, it just leaves me to say again, thank you to our wonderful speaker, Sydney. Thank you to each of you for joining us in another digital dialogue. We do hope you've enjoyed this one and might take the time to join us as well for our sessions taking place tomorrow. As I mentioned earlier, the recordings will be available through our website. But until we meet again, I do hope you remain safe and well. Thank you so much, Sydney.
Thank you, Rose.